given the latest CMS rules and regulations altogether too. So let's see if I'm able to perform this task well enough. Are you able to see my screen and hear me?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic, fantastic. And again, thank you again. Thank you to Weedy and for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you, Nancy. And so it's always great to be among the friends. Being a computer scientist and data scientist and electrical engineering, enjoy the technical conversations that we always had with Weedy in the past. So today's topic, as we mentioned, it's about interoperability. Borrowing from the college curriculum, we're going to title the session as a 101 to the fundamental, I will say, the component of how to build a trusted framework where you don't trust anyone and you verify everything and assume that there's always going to be a breach in the system altogether too. So without further ado, let's talk about myself, and some of my colleagues are joining me today. They could not be here next to me, but they are there. They are Kevin Deutsch, who heads up our Health Plan Cloud division, and Paul Garrett, who's our main contact for any of the follow-up conversations. And brief bios are also available to you, obviously. Given, again, as I said, my background in the technology space, I have found this to be my mission, even though I had no prior healthcare, either as an administrator, payers, or provider as the experience. So we kind of, Softheon, the company that we have founded, have taken a kind of a different path to solving the healthcare problems. So we're going to talk, obviously, interoperability a little bit about today, and then we'll talk about facing the tight deadlines that industry is being working against altogether too. And obviously, the next big thing is going to be something very new to the healthcare, which is the exchange of data among the trusted partners in a very similar, very already taken for granted in the e-commerce world or travel industry or a financial world altogether too. So we'll dive into those topics as well too. Before we continue, a little bit about Softheon. I want to take the opportunity to kind of reintroduce you to. We are a rapidly growing organization. This picture feels like a decade ago now. We continue to our mission is making healthcare affordable, accessible, and plentiful. And we would like to achieve that goal using technology, using data science, using artificial intelligence, robotic processes, and obviously elements of interoperability. A little bit more, double click on the Softheon icon, if you will. The platform that we've built is actually as an infrastructure, as a platform, as well as software as a services. It is a government-grade cloud infrastructure. We are one of those very few has achieved and attained a NIST 853, FIPS 140, MARS-E compliancy. This is what it requires you to be interconnected with the federal data systems. Obviously, our work with multiple state entities as well as the federal exchanges. It has given us the opportunity to really put together the infrastructure that is needed, that is trusted, that is always under some form of compliance, audits, and requirements, whatever that is. I mentioned about our employees. We are proud to be the home to 200 people with a various background, mainly technology, as I mentioned, computer scientists, data scientists. And we are located, well, we used to be located, but we're now digitally connected with Stony Brook University, where we collaborate with 250 plus PhDs on exciting topics. A different kind of an anomaly, perhaps. Softheon is also organically grown. We have not taken any outside finances. So yet we have achieved a significant growth over the last several years as being recognized by Deloitte and Cranes and Inc. 500s and whatnot too. So there are three areas that we focus on here at Softheon. Our primary business area is B2B, whereby We are currently actively engaged with 58 insurance payers. Out of 225, 27 carriers are participating in ACA. So remember, about 25% of the ACA payers are managing 3.4 million lives out of 11.5 million, roughly 30% of the consumers on the Softian infrastructure, Softian platform. We're also the merchant of record. We manage financial services, we manage billing, we manage anti-money launderings and foreign of asset control, office of asset control. And these are the elements obviously related to the financial stability of the organization. So once again, we are able to put together a framework that allows our customers to take advantage of that investments that we have made over the last literally 18 plus years. Our government division today is being used by, is being partnered by Massachusetts Health Connector. Many of you know it as a Romneycare. It is a platform. Obviously, the model became the model to Obamacare, and proudly partnering with the state of Massachusetts, serving roughly 400,000 lives for all their health insurance needs. And most recently, also working with states like New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Indiana, and West Virginia about the Medicaid trusted platforms for eligibility and asset verifications. And we are one of the very few partnered to CMS for the purpose of enhanced rate enrollment. In essence, what TurboTax to IRS is, we are that entity to CMS. We are able to issue subsidies, do the identity proofings, and all kind of asset verifications and whatnot ties into this thing, so that those individuals can receive those benefits that they expect from under the ACA provisions. And finally, we have recently became the broker of record for AARP. In fact, let's talk about on that piece a little more about that. This is very important for us. Obviously, we have done a lot of work working with the health plans in the areas of building their infrastructure to manage the ACA consumer population. With our AARP partnerships, AARP Converge by Softian allows us to bring that e-commerce capabilities to roughly 38 million AARP members. So we're in the process of, if you can think about it, authenticating 38 plus million consumers able to come in, do shopping around purchasing the plans, being able to share that plan information with the doctor or with the health plans. Part of the shopping experience, we have to pull out the provider information from them. We have to pull out formularies and drug information, and this is all part of the shopping experience. Perhaps you're start to see the trend about what we are accomplishing in terms of our transition to extend our platform for the purpose of interoperability. So let's talk about consumerism. You know, interoperability obviously is the mandate to give the power to the consumers. The consumers are therefore responsible and empowered to make the decisions about their health and well-being, about the access to their medical records, and about to collaborations about putting the member, putting the consumer at the center of that experience of receiving and benefiting from health insurance. Going back to about 10 years ago when we embarked upon ACA implementations, being the engineers we are, we said, let's take a kind of a first principle thinking approach. And then we said, you know, who has implemented a very successful exchange models altogether to where you have countless trading partners talking with one another and not necessarily, in fact, knowing each other, but through some kind of a common framework, some kind of a common trusted framework. So obviously, at the time was very big win. Expedia becoming a very big things, and bookings and price lines and whatnot too. And then we kind of double click on that piece to see, quote unquote, we call it travel supply chain management. So the article that I put out there, and your reference will be available to you as well, is got picked up later on by Oliver Wyman Group. It's one of the, as you can imagine, is probably, I trust many of you know them, provide a lot of insight, a lot of thinking, a lot of thought leaderships to many of the health plans. And really the similarities are striking if you think about it. So here we are, we're starting with a consumer experience. The consumer basically logs onto one of these web portals, and then through any one of them, in real time, able to access to, here I have highlighted only 3 of them, but there are a plethora of services that are available, obviously through these aggregators that are available on the website for consumer to have that frictionless shopping experience. So as we go through the path, you can see that they can pull down a real-time seating arrangements, pricing information from the airlines. The next minute, they can go down to the hotels and the cars and so on and so forth. And then they're able to check out at the same exact site in real time and basically walk away with those products and services they have just purchased in real time. So we said, that's fantastic. So how does this happen? How does Expedia knows how to talk to Delta? Or how do they know talk to the Hilton? By the way, there are over, I believe, a couple of thousand airlines on the network. We'll talk more about the metrics as we proceed. Well, the magic happens with this thing called OTA. OTA, unlike CMS mandate, it was an industry initiative. The bunch of basically the companies that are actually competing with one another. If you think about the airlines, pretty much they're in a direct competition. Well, they're actually, maybe they're one of the first ones to implement the competition, compete and cooperate. Because today you can fly to your destination in one airline and come back on a different airlines. So that kind of a collaboration led its way into what's called OTA. It's an open travel agency. It's an open protocol. It's been around for 20 plus years. It allows any organization to be a participate in the framework. Obviously, you have to meet the requirements, and there are elements about the trust aspect to it and so on and so forth. The barrier is quite high. It's not that easy. It has become a lot easier over the last several years. But as a result, it ended up generating a $1.2 trillion industry, and roughly 60+%, nearly $800 billion of this thing, funds are being transferred, controlled through OTA framework, which is fantastic, which is amazing. And there are many examples like these, by the way. If you look into ATMs, how does ATMs are connected to every bank in real time with access to your bank accounts? There are so many similar examples. So if we apply for a brief moment, kind of a first principle thinking, and let's design the system from ground up. And what the system will look like this. So you have a lot of APIs. You have a lot of elements about this thing altogether, global distribution system, GDSs, which is kind of the registry if you think about it. It tells you where things are. It tells you what airlines are on the systems. It tells you what hotels and everything else. And through the categorization and classification of the stakeholders in the system, you can have someone like Delta, Expedia, all the way to the top left corner, to the bottom, all the way to the things like OpenTable. Imagine a capability that OpenTable has. They tapped into this network. You can now reserve a table at your favorite restaurant using the same exact API framework as you will be buying your plane tickets on Delta or JetBlue. So this has become our blueprint. And by the way, if you wanted to build a business model as a vendor, as an entity who wants to bring value to this organization like Sabre does, like Amadeus does it, in the healthcare space, your business model cannot be this old traditional, design, build, operate, enterprise licensing model. Industry has moved away from a bunch of silos that are sitting in the data centers to pretty much everything is on the cloud. And as a result of it, you're seeing a different business model where the monetization happens at a transactions as little as hundreds of thousands of a penny that you charge your customers with access to that information. So no one party bears the full responsibility. Imagine a system like this, which is basically privately funded and operated platform altogether too. It's generating nearly $1 trillion, $800 billion revenues and models that go through the platform. So this is our story. This was a study that we have done in the early days. And this is what we did. We took all that entire exact same experience, We replace Expedia with healthcare.com. We replace Priceline with AARP. We are also partnering with our companies like eHealth and Health Sherpas and Willis Towers and Take Command. These are our retail partners. Through that retail experience, when the consumer comes in, if they are over 65, today they got the path of our MA product lines. Or if they're under 65, we will take them through our possibly even subsidized route if they are able to get some subsidies from the federal government as a result of their FPL. Or we might be able to offer them a commercial product of exchange. And single sitting, you are now able to also make a payment and effectuate yourself. So we pretty much, in our early days, crawl, walk, run, we're in the probably, I will say, we're in the walk phase of our technology. We are basically have built the partnerships with every one of those entities in our own way to mimic and emulate what airlines have done it with OTAs, what banks have done with the FedWire networks, and now we're building the same exact network capabilities within our platform. So this is our step towards the credibility. And part of our technology, what we have done, we have taken that one monolithic administration concept, and we've outlined them and created an entire stream of services. Under our current model, every one of these services are accessible through individual APIs. APIs that are connected through common data models, and APIs that are connected through trusted networks, trusted client secrets and client IDs and everything else, where each and every one of these subsystems can actually run in its autonomous way in somewhere in the cloud at an unknown location. We leverage the orchestration capabilities and everything else. So let's make the translation very quickly. This is a little bit more technical detail. I hope that you will appreciate it. So today we collect the data, obviously from, let it be from FFM or eHealth, again, against our quote unquote retail partners. And then we pass the information to the health plans where we do in real time or batch-based processing on occasion. Obviously, we reconcile the data. We take the claims data, we take the enrollment data, we pass it back on to CMS for the purpose of CSR, max out-of-pocket calculations, and then the risk adjustments. It's a very hot topic, as you know, in the world of ACA. And then we also have a supporting subsystems, let it be bankings or credit card merchant processing or fulfillment, printing, email, and services. These are all disparate systems. Everything's running on the cloud across multiple data centers that we currently own and operate, with the exception of physical locality. Every one of our data centers are NIST 800 certified and Mars E certified. Obviously, this is the highest grade of security and authentication. So let's make the translation. Let's start, like to talk about the next couple of minutes. Let's talk about the challenges ahead. Well, as we all know that interoperability and patient access rules have been mandated by CMS at an aggressive timelines. So let's take a look at what those are. Just a kind of quick refresher for you. Obviously, public reporting and information blocking. This is an element of CMS, basically has been collecting a lot of data about, again, eligible clinicians, hospitals, and critical access, and then able to identify the blocking base, how they can attest to the information, and how the information can be shared across the parties altogether too. So obviously, the information we'll hear is going to have some additional, perhaps, guidance and direction for us. Now let's talk about the next topic, the digital contact information. And once again, CMS has been collecting a lot of information over the years, obviously, most importantly, the years of 2019 and 2020. And we'll be providing that, basically, that contact information and distribute it in the form of a national plan and provider enumeration systems. With these two additional guidance coming in place, as you probably know, the interoperability initial deadline was actually 1/1/2021, merely less than 90 days away. With the COVID pandemic, the administration decided to decided to move those deadlines by roughly about 6 to 7 months. So at this point in time, we can, in fact, perhaps we can contemplate on additional delays depending upon the pandemic, how it's going to be, managed and contained. Obviously, vaccination is going to be the key things. So, say the least, our administration has been somewhat, quote unquote, distracted. And so we kind of take a conservative approach of a reinforceability of the law, perhaps the latter part of the year rather than even the July timeframe. So basically, there are 5 critical elements that every organization, every payer, provider, any organization, applications that we're going to start to see on the webs, on your iPhones, on your iWatches, they're going to provide the patient access. So with the exception of standalone dental plans, SADPs, and the health plans that are available to the small group market on the Federal Exchange and shop markets, any individual product line has been sold to across the marketplace, ACA, obviously, Medicaid and Medicare. Those organizations has to provide the information about the patient information, mostly about the clinical data, and derived from the claims information. The second big one is about the provider. Provider information obviously will also include the hospital doctor information that every organization must be able to provide to the consumer, to the members, on demand as they need it. I'm going to read some of my notes in here about this. Basically, it's about the the idea here is about combining the clinical data, if you think about it, that's being derived from the claims. And as the claims world, as we all know, there's a lot of CMMI initiatives around from a fee-for-services model to the outcome-based, value-based models altogether too. We are looking to quantify the outcome or the success of that treatment, the episodes, and combining that data with the provider data. Now you are able to actually perform some interesting models that you were able to perform. Obviously, tying that information on the hospital side to the admission discharge, we think significant portion of that data, source of that data, will come from the EMRs and EHR systems. That will be coupled with, again, claims, outcome services. As you can see, you're seeing that trend in here. It's a rough draft. It's nothing to be refined yet. But if this thing comes in place and start to truly, vet out we got to see a lot of mishaps, perhaps in a few years initially, just like in the early days of ACA. But I think that as we proceed with it, we're going to start seeing some interesting models around this piece altogether too. So let's take a look at the next one. Obviously, then the payer to payer. This is going to be very critical, especially the churning within the health insurance payers, that the members are moving from plan to plan. So with that in mind, the systems interoperability rules requires even the person no longer will be a member to you, kind of going back to CMS rules and everything else in early days about HIPAA rules, you need to retain the membership data, including the claims data, for foreseeable future. Because several years later, a member may be able to come back and still ask for the claims record, and then that data has to be carried over. So these are interesting areas that I think that there's going to be some additional, perhaps deregulations, or maybe the opposite, more regulations like GDPR rules that are being imposed to make sure that the individual privacy is always being protected, right? And this data cannot be used for prior conditions type of enrollment underwriting rules altogether too. So this is, again, interesting topic, but obviously you can see the great value. And this is something extremely common in other industries like car insurance or even financial services, right? Your FICO score, that anybody can get to it. It's based on your prior records, and you're able to apply that to your current business models and create and generate some, the fees and structures around that data. So data is driving the decision. as you can see. This is the main building block of the interoperability. And finally, getting into the duals aspect to it. As you probably know, this is by the percentage, is probably the lowest population under the government-sponsored program, Medicare and Medicaid, yet it's one of the highest expenses incurred in this business. So this is more about cost containment and cost-cutting initiatives about driving quality services to those individuals who are then able to provide the benefits, if you will, that using the technology to drive those decisions about how to serve those things. So if you look into these, basically those 5 major pillars. So here's our take on these components to it. We think that given the size and the scale of the implementation, given the element of consumer-driven model in here, the enterprise systems as it is, it will be significantly lacking. They will be under significant stress. And by the way, did we mention that none of these things has any effect about how the payers are paying their claims, how they're administering their premiums, are collecting their fees, and whatnot too. This is basically a compliance issue, okay? The mistake that was made by early days on the ACA side, even by the largest health plans, the mistake was ACA was an application. It was just a portal. So let's put this on top of our existing systems in here that we had, 20 years ago, we purchased it. But we invested so much into this thing, so we want to drive every penny out of the system. Well, guess what happened? The system wasn't scaling enough. That 5%, 10% of your membership came from ACA, ended up demanding and affecting the 90% of the investments that you have to put in, because this is very different than everything that has been done in the past. So these are the 4, I will say, parameters, 4 dimensions that we urge every health plan and every health provider to consider. One is look to cloud. No reason to invest more on-prem services and products, which we're going to go deeper dive into this thing. The next one is adopt open standards, because you are not going to know who your trading partners are. You're not going to know which application that consumers are using on their iPhones or Android devices or their PCs. And that's, by the way, it has to be forward compatible. In the software business, we commonly refer to things like backward compatible. When you do something new, you need to make sure that you are supporting the earlier version of the browser, earlier version of the Windows operating systems, and whatnot. This is an interesting topic. This brings the topic of forward compatibility. The decision you make today has to be applicable and meaningful 5, 10 years from down the road, so that you don't exclude yourself from a market, from a device, and perhaps an IoT device, okay? And perhaps something that you put on your, attach it to your body that automatically pulls out the interoperability data from the trading partner, and it just defines exactly that how much of that, quote unquote, the glucose has to be released in your diabetes device that you're wearing now on IoT. That's the kind of thinking that we are asking, we're urging everyone to consider. Obviously, data mapping. Under the hood, we have worked with many hundreds of health plans, insurance companies. The technology under the hood is extremely fragmented, extremely redundant, to the point that you find conflicting information between the payer system, between the finance system, to the claim system, to the enrollment systems. To a customer, you have to give them one set of data, and it has to be the accurate data. Then finally, we talk about the scales. So let's go drill down a little bit more about these pieces. Okay, so here's your HL7 Fire Cloud. And you thought you just have to build a website. Wrong. Let's build up from the grounds up. Number 1 is data center. You need to have a multiple data center operating at 100% uptime. Well, maybe you can get away with the 99.9999% uptime. 2 a.m. in the morning, patient at an emergency room. The doctor wants to access the medical records. Do you think that they care that you're doing an upgrade at 2 a.m. in the morning? No. You don't give them an access, there's a guaranteed litigation lawsuits coming on your way. So you need to build a fully redundant data centers that are able to support this infrastructure at all times. One side goes down, disaster recovery, hurricanes, storms, the other side goes up. Through the cloud, you have different constituents. You have the federal government. They're going to be constantly asking for data from you. It'll be constantly providing data to you. To your right is the other payers, payer-to-payer exchange, who are going to be pushing the data, with each and every one of them will be running on their own cloud setting, most likely, with a varying degrees of transactional accounts, varying degrees of security settings, perhaps. To your left, the bottom left, the providers, same thing. Maybe the data is coming from a one-directional, because I don't think you're going to be providing a lot of data to the providers, but they may. They may look into, if I checked into the one hospital, I'm in one EMR system, and I travel, now I move, relocate to another state, the next hospital check-in is going to most likely ask me to get all my records from a hospital system thousands of miles away from where I am. So we can see the information being shared across. But more importantly, look at your top left corner. These are the new entries. These are the ones who want to disrupt and change the landscape of healthcare. These companies are coming in with an appetite to take a piece of that $3.6 trillion market, that healthcare market, that they have not any product and services. Google wants to come in. Facebook wants to come in. Amazon coming in. And Walmart, there should be a typo up there. I apologize. That's the Walmart logo, not the Amazon logo. These organizations had no product and services offering, but now realizing that healthcare is big. It can be an enabler of other product and services. Exactly what OTA did it with travel industry. It started from something like Expedia. It ended up with OpenTable, and God knows where it's going to be the next 5-10 years, that framework settings. What happened with weather.com, how the weather data propagated itself into the industries, it turned into another multi-trillion-dollar industry. This healthcare model will about to become the same. And these are another exciting things. The Google, the Facebook, Amazon, they're not coming to the market just for the 300 million US population. The model that has been built, and make no mistake, they had a tremendous amount of lobbying about making these interoperability rules pass down very fast and quick. I'm not here to make a political statements, but you can see the lobbying and the enforcement that they bring to the table. Because their addressable market size is not 300 million. Their addressable market size is 7.6 billion people. The solutions that are being put out altogether, it is a global problem. It's a global solution, global addressable markets. And this is why we think you have to start thinking big. Not to build a website to give you the information, not to build the 2-3 endpoints that you got to give the information. Conversely, you can benefit from the information they collect. And that's the really exciting thing about that. Imagine there's going to be a day, perhaps, that a member applies for a coverage and gives you the consent to pull down every one of their medical records, every information that is actually uploaded to Amazon and Google. You can now pull that data as well. Playing field is not being leveled. Next topic, open standards. I know I'm talking to a bunch of technical guys and technical guys altogether, obviously, HIPAA 5010, 834, A221, EDI X12 specification. The world doesn't talk that. Amazon doesn't talk that. Google doesn't talk that. They talk about these products, these standards. You're going to have the NIST 5th certification. At the least, you should have a high trust certification, at the least, of your infrastructure and data setting. The day you turn the system that the day you become a bullseye target to hackers, the data that you have is way too valuable. You're going to need a product like OpenAPI, OAuth. Excuse me. Sorry about that. OpenID, Swaggers, OData, Dockers, Kubernetes, Jenkins, Chefs, Cucumber, Markdown, Rapid7s, Parasoft. The list goes on and on and on. I could not put all these standards that are under the Googles, Amazons of the world, how the open standards are being formed. HL7 provided you a lot of guidance around what you should be using, especially around things like Smart App Connects, about using OAuth 2.0 protocols or SAML 2.0 protocols. You got to implement. I don't know if we have the capability, but at some point in time, I would love to be able to do a quiz and a survey, perhaps a questionnaire about how many health plans are using these products. How many applications do you think that you have in your IT portfolio is using these products for the delivery and services of current healthcare administration or services? I will be surprised if it becomes a double-digit number in the percentages. Healthcare became too protective. The barrier of entry is too high, and therefore we don't explore things. We don't experiment things. We use things as being defined. Well, that's about to change in a very, very different way. So let's talk about the subsection of it. I'll give you again 2 examples. One is the Zero Trust Framework. Zero Trust Framework, if you think about it, your ability to identify every individual, starting with 300 million, 5-10 years down the road, 7.6 billion people. And you need to be able to identify those people. Well, how do you identify and authenticate the people you never met? Well, they have their own trusted places. They might be using Facebook. They might be using Twitter. Sometimes you see this, you log on with your LinkedIn account, log on with your Google account, or you can log on with your Softian account. We do have the same exact capabilities. So what you need to do is adapt these models. To the same point, the moment you adapt it, how do you know people not attacking you? How do you know some 16-year-old hackers in Eastern Europe is about to break into your all the access username and passwords? So you need to build an infrastructure, as we call it, trust no one. Zero Trust Framework, exactly what it's designed for it. It doesn't require a VPN. It uses open standards. It's been successfully used, including companies like Softian, as we mentioned, for the purpose of managing $5+ billion in transaction fees we process today, as well as enrollment transactions. Another important aspect is open APIs. The moment you open up the API to access to medical records, API to access to claims data. Well, how do you know that who's making these calls? You see it on the little chart up there? I'm a little suspicious of the fact that we had a big peak of operation transaction durations. Well, what happened? What happened at that time? How do I know that's the trusted partner making a legitimate access with someone with an extensive medical records, or someone is trying to really poke around and trying to impose a denial of service, what's called a DDoS attacks. Everybody's attacking you, trying to find basically a backdoor into your infrastructure. So APIs is very important. Markdown, it's an interesting topic, by the way. Markdown is an automated documentation. It's an automated documentation, allows you to, whatever you publish on the internet, it becomes automatically an asset that they can do. Why? Well, because you are not going to know who the party you're accessing your APIs. They need to be able to do this at their own time, at their own resources, using your documentation. Okay? As an insurance company, you're not in the software business. You're not going to sit down and try to explain to your engineers how to connect to Anthem versus how to connect to Aetna and CVS, how to connect to Kaiser, how to connect to Accession healthcare systems or Intermountain healthcare systems. That's the diversity is going to come in. And all that information is going to be published. These APIs are going to get upgraded over time. These APIs are going to be someone will be retired over time. The documentation is critical. And what you need is a platform that documents itself. And believe it or not, if you adapt to OpenAPI's Swagger framework, the markdown documentation will be automatically generated, and your customers, your trading partners can find that information without calling you, emailing you. Another interesting topic. Data mapping. I think this group probably is going to have the most affinity to this topic. X12, A34, A221, A1220. Forgive me for that exact subversion, conversion altogether too. There is your data descriptions, and then we load them up in here. What you really see on the right-hand side is actually softly on screens that how we take the data, we normalize the data. You need to adapt an MDM strategy. You need to build a platform that you're able to take any data into the standard industry formats, if there was one. If not, build one. But you have to expose the data through those common APIs, the common standards. Just as, 4010 to 5010 to 6010, the format's going to change. So you need to build a platform that you're able to modify the data model independently of the applications that are using those data to execute those processing. How do you do that? How do you find a way by changing the database schema? I'm going to use an analogy that you don't break any one of the applications that are using the schema. That's a challenging task. That requires a different thinking process. Master data models, once again, self-documenting entities. We at Softion, we have built an MDM platform. We call it our metadata dictionary. So we are able to generate this metadata dictionary, and way we store the data, independent of the applications that are calling. Our translation layer, it determines and defects exactly how do you present the data, what data elements. And we subscribe to another standard called OData. OData interface allows any one of our trading partners, certified, authenticated with the proper client access and client secret keys and whatnot, able to access to any one of our records with some limitations. If anybody wants to pull down a certain number of records, we will be alerted. We will block the traffic. We'll notify the trading partner and asking their intent. Then we have to authorize them for that activity. So everything is being controlled in a threshold, in a throttle manner. You need that model because you're going to be maintaining this data for foreseeable future, way after your members are no longer a member of your health plan's organization. Scale. This is a quick illustration of it, what we think that is, what's going to happen. So your payer admin system on the right-hand side. You try to build that model, that HL7 cloud on an on-prem, you have your work cut out. And to be frank with you, in fact, given the 6-month to time implementation, I don't believe any health plan can implement a such solution with an on-prem resources. What was your last experience about building the, upgrading, let it be a tri-set of facets, or upgrading from QNX, you're migrating to Health Edge? 6 weeks or more like 6 years. So this is a challenging task. And this is why we think that you got to think about scale, think about cloud. It's not just about the scale. It's not just about the getting it right for the first time. But what about continuous? Just like ACA, we expect the federal administration to continuously refine and tweak these requirements. So what you need is a continuous development, continuous integration, and continuous deployments. What I mean by continuous, that's without taking the sites down. Remember our earlier comment about you need to be able to ensure a 99.99 at a minimum. We call it a 4.9, or most likely it'll be 6.9 SLAs you need to have. How do you do that without taking the sites down? You put up a new website. How do you do that without breaking the old API? Put up a new APIs. This is a new way of thinking. And to be frank with you, this is the skill set. We see a lot of opportunities for health plans to partner If not, bring it in. If you can bring it in, bring it in. But if not, partner with an organization like Softheon and others to be able to help you with these things, achieving those goals in the cloud on your behalf. So we become your, quote unquote, your main wholesaler. I'm going to use the sales and the supply chain analogy. Partner with a wholesale platform. And your wholesale platform will then connect you to all the retailers. But from your core administration system organization, you then partner with just one party. So you have a one-to-one relationship, and then the trusted partner does all the aggregations and all the dissemination for you.
Hello, Eugene. You have about 3 minutes remaining.
I'm going to wrap it up very quickly. The next thing is continuous deployments. As I mentioned a couple of times altogether too, and a lot of topic, we'll cover them up there. The next steps. All right, we know it's a quantum leap. This is also tested and confirmed by Gartner. As you can imagine, they are the trusted resource. And this is, we're talking about our engineers. Some of them are here old enough to know that Y2K. Some of you may know about what happened in the Y2K. This is like a Y2K for healthcare. May not happen with a strict deadline like Y2K did it. Over time may happen, but we'll definitely get there. Next steps, take an agile approach. Don't try to do it all at once. Okay, through the agiles, the MVP, call it a minimum viable product approach altogether, call it a sprints, and so on and so forth. Try to deliver the product in multiple phases, not in one phase, because the phases will continue to repeat itself. A lot of questions and takeaways. Obviously, I'm not going to go through every one of them, so I took the liberty of it. As we make this presentation available to you, you're welcome to take these questions. Let it be your administration, reporting to chief strategy officers or CEOs, or finance or operations, or CIOs. So these are the questions that we pose you. These are just a small subset of questions, obviously. We expect you to have many, many more questions. And we would love to hear from you, by the way. If you care to do so, please do share. Because the risks are high. That's too high, perhaps. And these are, I'm not trying to put them on a spot altogether. These are the organizations. These are the top health plans in the country. Top health plans. They do not have resource issues. They do not have the money issues. They were able to put together amazing teams. Despite that, the pain and suffering has been so severe. In fact, some of them ended up exiting ACA. This was too much of a problem for them. And as the McKinsey chart shows on the top right, on the right side, health plans, it just basically customer satisfaction, just basically, I believe they tied up with USPS. US Postal Office has the same level of customer satisfaction as the health insurance carriers. Compared to auto insurance, which is among the highest satisfaction, compared to brokerage services, which is the highest satisfaction. What's missing in here? Think about that. Ultimately, I didn't want to put the caption in here. I'm going to leave it to your imaginations. This is unfortunately happens more often than not in health insurance and healthcare data altogether too. So this kind of sums up my presentation. I thank you for the wonderful opportunity, and I'm happy to take your questions. If you have anything being posted, I welcome the opportunity to answer your questions or comments and concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugene. I'm not seeing any questions or answers in the chat box, but, or I shouldn't say questions, but if you do have any questions, we can certainly funnel those to you, Eugene, if any questions do come in. So with that, I am going to turn everything over to Mike Kennedy from TIBCO for our next session.
Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day.
Well, thanks a lot, Eugene. I thought that was really interesting. I think that for a lot of us that have been part of this journey for many, many years, it's nice to finally see the possibility of open healthcare actually start to form. And I agree with a lot of your ideas about, I think now is the time for healthcare organizations to be thinking about moving beyond traditional infrastructure, moving to the cloud, increasing the surface area of their data, you know, engaging with OpenID, OAuth 2, you know, that kind of security. It's an exciting time. Well, next I'd like to introduce Denise St. Clair, who is from CMS, to educate us all on USCDI. I know that a lot of the TIBCO customers have been trying to figure this out. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that are trying to figure out where they should map data from to get it into their FHIR repositories. So please educate us, Denise.
Thank you, Mike. And I am very, very, very happy to be joined today by Patrick Murda from Humana, who will give you how it actually